starting record. Here we go. Okay. All right. Yeah, let's wait another minute. We have quite a lot of attendees now. How is my audio? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Serge. Okay, perfect. All right, let's start, I think. People can join in as they want. So welcome everyone to the first Apache Unomi Meetup. Unfortunately, it's online, it's not physical. I hope we can have an opportunity to meet in real life soon. But anyway, we'll make do with this. So this is the first meetup ever that we've done for this community. And we have an agenda that's quite packed for this one. We planned this over 2 hours, but we'll see how we fit into that. But I would love to have some time at the end for more open kind of discussions if we can. So the first thing is I'd like to do a roundtable. Unfortunately, due to the format of this webinar, I think that if you guys could just put this in the chat, if you could just put, it's completely optional, you don't have to do it, but I would just love to know, you know, who you are, who you work for, or what organization you're part of, where you're based, and if you use Unomi and what you use it for. That would be fantastic. As I said, it's entirely up to you. I think it's better to do it in text format if you're okay with that, because I don't want to spend too much time. And to be honest, I'm not that good with the Zoom webinars yet, so I'm not sure how that would work with everybody if I had to ask everybody to speak in a roundtable. So yeah, I'll just give people just a minute here. But you can just fill that out. If you have trouble finding the chat, that's okay. Thank you, Nick, for starting that. And of course, I'll present myself. So I'm I have multiple hats today. I'm the Apache Unomi Project Management Committee Chair. So that means I'm sort of responsible for reporting to the Apache Foundation board on how well the project is doing and what's going on with it. I have no authority whatsoever in that regard. I'm also one of the people that started the project before I was even at Apache, and I'm also the CTO at Jahia. And I'm based in Switzerland, actually. And about how we use Unomi, you'll see more of that in the presentation with Romain. So let's get into the state of the Unomi. So the idea of this presentation is sort of to give a quick recap of what Unomi is and what's been happening with the project. So here, if you have questions, so there's the chat that you can use. We would prefer to take questions at the end for people that are willing to speak. But if you have any questions directly, put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it, and I'll just sort of look at that. Yeah, that's basically all I had for the moment. Oops, sorry. So what is Apache Unomi? So it's sort of a way to pronounce Unomi. So really the idea to know the visitors that are coming onto systems. So as we can see on the right here, we can have different systems that are connected to Unomi, browsers and what I call apps. Apps can be anything ranging from a CMS, a CRM, a mobile application. All these different things could be used to talk to Unomi and retrieve information. I sort of use the term API first customer data platform engine. So that's a lot of buzzwords, but basically what it means is that it's really designed around an API, and that all the functionality is accessible through the API. And customer data platform is funny because it's a term that was actually invented after the Unomi project started. So we just realized that we fit into that box, and so that's what we used. And so it handles profiles for visitors, segmentation, personalization, sessions, events, and a lot more. It has a built-in real-time rule engine, and this is a very important part of the way Unomi works. And it's also the reference implementation of CDP standard that was worked on by a few companies. So about that standard, so it's a collaboration between two companies. There were initially more, but you know how standards go, people come and go. So Enonic and Jahia, and a quick hi to all the people from Enonic here. I know there are a couple on the call. So thanks guys for really helping us with this effort. It's very appreciated. So basically here there's two things that were happening on this collaboration. The custom data platform specification. So that's really a work to say, okay, how can we standardize CDP access and interactions, and then the reference implementation that was implemented at the Apache Foundation, here again, making it very open and standard. So just to give you a quick peek, I don't want to go into too much detail into the customer data platform standard. So it uses GraphQL as its API standard, and basically here you see an example of how to process events, and you can this event here is actually an example of how to update a profile. So basically here just using standard GraphQL you can easily update a profile. So if we look at the data model, the really, let's say, high level data model, we have profiles. So those are the central pieces of information that are collected by the CDP. Profiles generate sessions. So basically every time somebody comes onto the system, a session is created. Sessions, for example, in the case of a mobile application, you could say a session is just, you know, the moment the person is using it, or you can reuse sessions. It's not really important to have a very specific notion of session there. And in each session, events are generated. So like a page view event and stuff like that, or a screen on a mobile app, these are events. One thing that's very interesting with what you can do with Unomi is real-time personalization. So you can here you have an example of a request where basically we want to know if a visitor is older than 18, then we want to display a content for somebody that's older than 18. Or if we don't know if he's older than 18 or he's less, we display the default variant. So this is an example of what is available out of the box in Unomi to do these types of personalizations. I've also mentioned the rules engine that is very central to the way that Unomi works. So Unomi collects events takes events as input. So you could have clicks, page views, and so forth, which go into the rule engine that will try to match the events to the rules that are deployed. And then these rules, if they match, will execute actions. And these actions could be resolve the location from the IP address, trigger integrations with other systems, or you could have your own actions that you build and deploy that could do anything you want. These actions are really little smart pieces of logic that you can execute. And actions will also modify objects such as profiles and sessions so that you can then store information inside the profile about what happened due to an event. So if we look at an example here, a very simple rule: when a visitor arrives on the site, then we increment the number of visits of this profile. So basically here, this is an example of actually deploying a rule inside of Unomi. And you can see here that we have a condition and an action. Those are the two main elements of the rule. And these conditions can be simple, like in this case where we just listen to the session created event, or they can be much more complex because we can create condition trees using Boolean conditions. And here, for example, we have a rule where when a session is created and a page is viewed, then we update the properties. So I'm not going to go into the details, but you know, you'll be able to access these slides after this meetup, of course. So that's sort of the bird's eye view of Unomi. There's a lot of other things I haven't talked about. I didn't want to take too much time about this. If you have questions about this, of course, we can take them afterwards. But I want to talk about what happened recently on the project. So 1.5 was a very important release for the project, included security fixes. So we had external reports of security issues with the expression language. And so these were actually fixed in a very effective way, but it does require that expressions are whitelisted. We also worked a lot on container compatibility. So really now a lot of people are using Docker and Kubernetes to deploy images. So 1.5 was really the version that made this a lot easier, including environment variable configuration. There was also the introduction of Elasticsearch 7 compatibility. So 7 is 7+, basically anything above 7. Before 1.5, we were at Elasticsearch 5, which for those of you that are familiar, between Elasticsearch 5 and 6, there was a major data model change in Elasticsearch. So that would required a lot of work. And of course, we had new contributors that contributed to the project. So a lot of those were included in 1.5. And so that's always something that we welcome very much to have you know, improvements on the platform. Now, what's coming for 1.6? So we're scheduling a 1.6 release for end of 2021. That's pretty soon. So we hope we'll make it. There are a lot of things that are already in there. There's an optimization on rule events. I mean, matching of rules and events. So that's something that's going to improve performance. There's the Groovy Actions API, so I'll get into that in a minute. There's upgrades of some of the frameworks that we use in Unomi, so Apache CXF, Jackson, and Apache Karaf. These were mostly done for security and also to get access to the latest features. For example, in Karaf, we benefited from the container improvements. There's also new things like being able to access the scores of profiles and a lot of bug fixes, so and improvements on past events for segments, so being able to enter and exit segments using past events and other things. And we also saw an issue with the migration to 1.5, so we corrected that also, and it's going to be included in 1.6. Now, one of the most important parts of 1.6 is Groovy Actions. So basically, the idea here is to be able to ease the use, I mean, the creation of connectors. So right now, if you want to build a connector in Unomi, you basically have to develop a Java OSGI plugin that you will deploy inside of Unomi. So there's a lot we identified that a lot of people want to use Unomi, but don't necessarily have those skills to develop them, something like that. We also saw that plugins don't necessarily work well in container deployments where you want to basically generate an image that's basically a sealed image, and you don't want to have to customize that too much to deploy logic. And also, finally, Java plugins can do anything. So potentially, this could lead to security issues, especially if you're deploying in containers. So for this reason, the Groovy Action API was introduced. It's Groovy if you're not familiar with it, but it's much closer to functional languages. So it's familiar to people like JavaScript developers and things like that. There's no need for packaging them as OSGI plugins. You can deploy them directly through a secured endpoint. And of course, it's designed to work well in container deployments. The actions are persisted and shared on the cluster. And finally, of course, the actions are sandboxed. So here the idea is really to limit what they can do so that they can't mess up the system. So associated with that, there's a proposal for a new project. So the project is to sort of build upon that and say, okay, let's build connectors with this and let's make it easy for people to share them and feature them. And so here the idea is to have a new top level menu entry in the Unomi website that's called connectors. The idea is to feature any plugin, so it could be a Groovy action or a plugin. And the goal is really to encourage people to build connectors and share them and feature them. So really here it's a community. Hopefully a community will help with this. Of course, it needs help bootstrapping. I mean, I'm just presenting this for the first time. So more examples are needed and, documentation is needed. Some examples of simple things could be like integration with Slack, Twitter, things like that. And of course, it's perfectly fine to send people to GitHub to download or to get source code of these things. We don't need to build like a full app store or anything. That's not the idea. So that's it for 1.6. Let's talk about 2.0. So here we don't know exactly the time frame, but the earlier the better, of course. But there are some major changes here. The GraphQL API, so that's part of the CDP spec. Profile aliases, which is the possibility to have multiple profile IDs for a single profile. That's to make it easier to have external references to profiles. And JSON schema declaration and validation. So a lot of what you saw in those 3 points have already landed, but there's still some work for the integration of JSON schema. We want to be able to use that for improving the Elasticsearch mapping and also improving the data model to support larger data sets. We've seen some people use like thousands of interests, for example, that cause issues. So we're trying to address those as well. Of course, we will keep upgrading the frameworks we rely on. And of course, that's just what's been identified so far, but other things might come in. And any data model changes will, of course, be supported by the migration tool so that the transition to 2.0 is as smooth as possible. A quick word about the GraphQL API. So it's a single entry point for the whole API. The idea is to be 100% spec compliant, and actually we cheat a little bit because since we work on the spec as well, we go back to the spec to do changes when we realize that something is causing a lot of issues, but it's working well. The idea is for it to be compatible with existing data sets, so no migration of the data is needed to work with the GraphQL API. It doesn't have the full coverage that the REST API has right now, but over time, that's what we're hoping for. Both APIs, so the REST and the GraphQL one, will be maintained, and hopefully we'll see the point where REST adoption drops and we can focus on GraphQL. I don't want to give a version here of Unomi where we're going to do that. I want to sort of see, with the community how things evolve. I think that's a better way of handling it. Also, the GraphQL API makes it easier to enforce structure for events because right now there's no real enforcement of the structure, which causes issues. And the API also introduces complex property structures, so not just key values, but you can now have like complex address structures and stuff like that. And as I mentioned, the ability to use multiple IDs for a profile. The JSON schema is something that has just landed recently. So here the idea is to be able to be much more declarative for all the objects that are inside. It also means that we'll have less reliance on Java code to declare our things. it'll be easier to just use JSON. So here on the right, you have an example of the profile JSON schema. And yeah, that's basically a very good fit for the API that is currently GraphQL and REST, so both use JSON. So of course, the schema also allows us to protect against any kind of security issues, like people trying to inject lots of data, invalid data. It also makes it easier to evolve the data model. It makes it possible to directly generate mappings for Elasticsearch without all the guesswork that's currently going on. And it's also possible to declare new value types. So that's what I mentioned, like emails, addresses. In the case of email, for example, that's something we get out of the box. JSON schema comes directly with an email structure, so we can just reuse that. And so basically, it just standardizes all the usage of JSON throughout Unomi, so it's a pretty good fit. And looking back, I'm wondering why we didn't do that before. Looking further after 2.0, so here there's no version attached to it, but some ideas. Again, there's nothing that's definitive here, but improving the internal architecture of the project. I know Jean-Baptiste is constantly asking when that will happen, because we're not Karaf compliant that much, but we would like to be more. And there are some things also we'd like to do, mostly to clarify the communication around the project. Right now we talk about extensions and plugins, including in the documentation. We would just like to focus on plugins. There's also ideas around improving the privacy. So the privacy in Unomi is actually quite good out of the box, because it includes consent management and things like that. But we have ideas that we could use, like a differential privacy and so forth. And of course, it'd be fantastic if Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Huawei, or others picked up Unomi and provided it as a service in the cloud, and so that you would just have to turn on the machine, turn on the service, and you're up and running. All right. That's it for this part of the first part of the presentation. As I said, if you have any questions, I'm just checking the chat right now, but I don't see any questions for the moment. Of course, we'll have some time at the end for the presentation, the questions. Now, I'm going to hand off to Romain, who will do the presentation of how we use Unomi at Jahia, at least the first part, and then I'll take the next one. Romain, should I keep the slides, or do you want to switch to your machine?
You can keep the slide if you want.
Okay. No, sorry, I need to switch to the other slide deck, yes.
Oh, I can do it as you wish.
I should have it. Let me just, oops, because this is the main slide deck. Here we go.
All right, so yeah, you can jump straight into it. Hi, everyone. So I work with Serge as a product manager at Jahia. Jahia started originally as a CMS and portal software vendors, meaning that we offer like a content platform, like a headless CMS, for those who are familiar with the concept, so API first content, and also site search and more globally management of sites. And we integrate Unomi to bring, let's say, the data-driven spirit to our CMS. So we collect data, we do segmentation analytics, and we use really Apache Unomi as the customer data platform engine to power personalized experiences for customers. Next slide. So if we start with the data collection, so there are a couple of transition. So we collect a lot of page views, downloads, clicks straight out of the box with our tracker. We also collect some more explicit data. It can be forms, it can be site searches or transactions if you're using e-commerce websites. And also the contextual data, which mainly goes into the session object of Unomi. So it can be the referrer, the device, and geolocation. So when it comes to Unomi, we have our custom JavaScript tracker, and we can discuss that. We would love to have a more open source approach to this. As Serge mentioned, it's totally possible with Unomi to take what's in the event and add that into the profile. And that's what we do for some URL parameters, for instance, and it allows us to define which visitor is coming from which campaign. It can be from email or ads or anything. And we use our logins that are managed through our CMS and portal to consolidate the data across sessions and profile to make sure that the profile are a bit more sticky and not just cookie based. We also offer UI to define the profile data model, so business user can basically define profile properties, and they can also define if it's personal identifier or if it's read-only or these kind of things. So we want to give control of the data model to business users, and Unomi allows us to do that. When it comes to analytics, so there are plenty of good reasons to do analytics. We are using two different technologies. We are using our own custom code, using JavaScript libraries like Git3.js and calling Unomi API. And we are also starting to embed Kibana dashboards directly in our UI. You can hit next. There is a small, yes, thank you. And what's interesting is that our UI basically provides the context to give to the Kibana dashboard. So if you're on a given site or if you're looking at analytics for a given page, we are sending that to Unomi, to Kibana, to ensure that the numbers and the metrics that you see matches the context of the user. Regarding segments, so the biggest piece here is really our condition builder. It's a UI allowing business user to define conditions, and this condition can apply to build segment, to build scoring plans, to build personalization. The great thing about Unomi segment is that you can really combine behavioral data with more declarative data like forms and data that can come from LDAP or CRM or marketing automation platform integrations. And the best thing here is that it's always up to date in real time, and a lot of systems don't allow to do that. So the fact to have always up to date segments as a profile level is a big strength here. We are using scoring plan when basically segments are not enough, when you need to be more granular. Scoring plans can be of good help, and that's what we use them for. As Serge mentioned, since Unomi it can support Boolean condition, and you can really combine different conditions. We are supporting that from our UI, and you can define the, I don't know, like profile property. Email exists with if the visitor has seen the home page or any other page. So combining these different any data that we collect basically on Unomi. Last thing is that the segments are very useful for us to do analytics and provide conversions or any metrics based on these segments. So it's not just analytics on the general population and on all the visitors, but you can really drill down at the segments level, which is very convenient for our customers. This part I would go very fast. It's really about the CMS part, because at the end, our goal is really to inform digital marketers on how they can create better content and better experiences for their own visitors. You can go ahead. So the more you know about your visitors and your profiles, well, it will get you to create better landing pages, launch better campaigns, improve your forms and everything. here, this part is really important for us. It's how we integrate really Unomi with our content creation part. Here you can see our preview panel, and thanks to the persona API of and object of Unomi, you can basically simulate the visit of end visitor, and we find that very convenient to test your personalization. So that's one thing in the flow, and then we are also using Unomi for A/B test and personalization. Personalization doesn't have to be always like sell more stuff to your visitor, but it can really be about how you can guide them, or you can teach them about new stuff, you can make, or they can achieve something a bit quicker on your website, and how you can reassure them. And yes, so that's the preview panel I just spoke about. And the personalization UI is really deeply integrated with our what we call page composer in our product. So in the UI that digital marketers are using to build pages. So at the end, our goal is to help our customers to switch from this create and fire and forget project mindset, meaning that I launch a website and then I launch the next website or something like that. It's really how you always keep control and measure everything that you do, and how you shift from a project mindset to a product mindset on your website, and improve the way you manage digital experiences. Sorry, that was a lot of buzzwords, but Serge will catch up with more tech stuff on the story behind Apache Unomi and Jahia. And of course, feel free to ping me if you have any question.
Yeah, thank you, Romain. Yeah, so again, I don't want to. I'm just looking at the time. I think we're on time, Nick. So basically, yes. So you may or may not know that Unomi started as a project at Jahia, but very quickly we thought, this is not something we want to do alone. It's a lot of work and has much potential as a community project. So and it's also a very critical piece of infrastructure that contains data that's quite sensitive at some point. So we thought it made a lot more sense for this to be managed by something else than a central entity. For Jahia, this is a very central part of what we offer as a product. So we will be helping this project for a long time. We are really committed. And for example, we already used Apache Jackrabbit as part of our CMS. So we understood, the value of doing this way. And so it was always to sort of give back and do the same thing for the CDP. So as Romain mentioned, we have products like JExperience that are built on top of Unomi. So basically, very quickly, this is just a UI that's doing requests directly to Unomi. So a lot of, 90% of the functionality you see here is actually provided by Unomi. So I won't go into all the details because I think Romain already mentioned quite a lot of these. Now, what's interesting is that it's also possible to build value on top of Unomi directly. And this is what we've done. So we have something called JCustomer, which is basically an extension of Unomi. And we've added two things on top of this. One of them is the custom items API. So it makes it possible to define new objects, and that will be managed by the same backend as Unomi. And it's also used in conjunction with the second API that's right below. But for the custom items, it's also possible to have a full API for create, retrieve, update, and delete, and including search of these objects. And so based on that, we needed custom items to be able to do recommendations. So the idea here is to be able to recommend, for example, offers or products. Here, what we've done is that we reuse the condition system that's inside of Unomi to build condition-based recommendations. Of course, there's another way of doing recommendations, which is based on artificial intelligence. And that's something that's not being done in this API for the moment, but it will be expanded in that regard. So basically, yeah, we have these two extensions on top of Unomi. And the idea again is that you could provide these on top of somebody that's already using Unomi. Last but not least, Jahia also has does a lot of QA on Unomi. So every time we find a bug, it goes back to Unomi. We do this as much as possible. We do provide support for our products that include Apache Unomi, so we sort of support Unomi in that way. We test the performance as well. So we're constantly improving the performance. And you saw, for example, I talked about the the rules execution. So that's one of the things we improved. And we try to help as much as possible the community, answering queries, contributing documentation, and so forth. So yeah, we are quite good at Unomi. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or need any help. All right, that's enough of me talking. I'm going to hand it over now to Nick. And
if you prefer to do some small Q&A, feel free. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, we have a couple of minutes. So yeah, if we want to have some questions, or if anybody has some questions, you should be able to raise your hand, and then I can just let you talk. Are there any questions at this point? And if you don't have questions now, it's fine to do them later. Okay, I don't see any questions for the moment.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, I think I put everybody to sleep, Nick. I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. I think everybody is still awake, but it's always tricky in these online meetups if you're not seeing the faces or the audience itself. But hi, everybody, wake up. Everybody's still here. Yes, energy, stand up from your chair, take a half-a-minute break. But let's continue indeed. Maybe just as an introduction. So my name is Nick Veenhof. I'm the CTO of Dropsolid, as I indeed explained or wrote in the chat. And to be very honest, I feel like a little like in Dutch we say a strange duck. I tried to translate it, and it says like the odd man out in English, because from the 15 years that I've been working in the IT industry, I've been working in the PHP ecosystem. So I worked a lot with Apache Solr in the past, which is also Java based, but only implemented it, and now it kind of feel the same. We were implementing a Java software, but don't ask me to look at the code. Like I'm completely lost if anything like has to change. That doesn't mean that I'm not very technical, but just to give you some context on this matter. But I do like it that these communities like get together at some point or are trying to figure out, okay, how can we collaborate? So that's just a small nuance. And I'm here to explain you a bit. Let me see. Oh, is it the right screen? Yes.
We did see some slides, yes.
Yeah, I don't have actually slides. It's just like one slide that I wanted to show to give you the overview, and then I'll just dive into the product itself that we built, including some architectural diagrams, and just to give you some nitty-gritty details. From a very high level overview, what Jahia showed basically is also something what we're providing, but then for a completely different CMS ecosystem. So the three things that you see here is Drupal, Mautic, and Unomi. This is also how we sell it to customers. So Dropsolid sells open DXPs, which is a digital experience platform. It's still a buzzword. If you go to Gartner, you'll find all kinds of buzzwords. So I'm not gonna bore you with any of that. But it does mean that we do believe in open source and in open ecosystems, not trying to lock anyone in. So if people build a project with our technologies, they can always go to another vendor and say, okay, I'll take whatever I have hosted with Dropsolid. Could be Unomi, could be Mautic or Drupal, and I'm going somewhere else because I'm no longer happy with Dropsolid, which is a bit scary because you don't have the lock-in, but ultimately also provides freedom for example, governments or large organizations. So that's more or less where we have a good fit. But that's as much as I'll say about that. Drupal is a PHP CMS. It's quite popular within those regions as well, governmental organizations. Mautic is marketing automation. See it as the open source HubSpot. If you know HubSpot, Mautic is HubSpot, but then the open PHP version of it. Now, what does the product do at Dropsolid is indeed provide personalization. Give you a really quick demo. This is a demo site. We see some random stuff. The important part here at the top is saying, okay, someone came in from a campaign. So if someone came in from a campaign, we want to personalize the website. Now, what does it mean, personalize a website? And you can see like it's a little block here. The Dropsolid implementation of Unomi also provides a Chrome extension that connects to Unomi. So this Chrome extension shows these segments coming from the API of Apache Unomi. And for example, if I change the segment here, we can see that also the button changed to say, get creative for Mother's Day. What happens behind the scenes is that it indeed makes an event to Apache Unomi. The whole condition engine is being activated. It puts your profile into a segment. The segment is being returned by, by the custom tracker. It places a cookie. The cookie goes into the new request to the CMS. And then based on the cache variation, it shows you this different variation of the page. And so why is the caching part of my explanation important? The websites that we serve are high traffic, and we don't want the personalization to have an impact on the cacheability of these websites, which is a bit tricky because personalization means lots of different variations. And you could say, okay, but it doesn't really work for high traffic sites. So we try to find a way to balance these two. Now, to get into the nitty-gritty details, how does the product itself look like from an interface point of view? This is the interface, and similar to Jahia, it actually interacts directly with the Apache Unomi API. So all these segments are here. And we can take a look at one of them, for example. You can see, okay, we have certain condition and all kinds of properties here that you can select. You can add a rule, you can add a group, you can like build all these segments. Basically, the UI implementation of the API. Now, what makes this a bit more special, that is, and I need to go here, is that we added pattern recognition, which means that all this data that goes into Unomi is interesting, but someone needs to somehow like understand what's in there. And we discovered that the customers that we serve, they don't have a marketing team of 10 people that really understand what they're actually doing online. They say like, I don't know how to start with personalization because it's tricky, lots of data, lots of all that stuff. So we added an assisted AI, and what the assisted AI does, I can show it here, is it tries to make groups of similar people based on all the profiles that are in Unomi. Because they visited these pages, they clicked on these texts, they somehow visited similar subjects. So you can see, okay, these are people that are looking for consultancy and training. This is people that are ready apparently to take the next step. It kind of explains these words. You can see these are probably Dutch people. Somehow the algorithm also recognizes different languages and then different segments within these languages. It's a fully autonomous algorithm, and I'll explain you how that works with the data of Unomi in a bit as well. Now, a little different from how Jahia showed the data or the visualization of the data is we built a Google Data Studio connector. And the Google Data Studio connector directly goes to the Elasticsearch of Unomi, because one of the reasons that the API of Unomi somehow wasn't flexible enough to show all the data fast enough. But that could be something to talk about in maybe a community event, or figure out, okay, how would we do this if we would try to provide a generic Apache Unomi Google Data Studio connector. It's not so easy. This was quite heavy to do, also because the Google Data Studio connector JavaScript language is a mess. It's a complete mess. But okay, yes. So what does that look like in practice? This is now just a a quick one that I created. But what makes this nice is that you can say, okay, all kinds of custom properties that I have in Apache Unomi, I can drag and drop in this dashboard, and I can create my own data set or my own dashboard. And even if you add, for example, Salesforce identifiers or whatever other systems that you have connected, you can merge all that data together to build like a single dashboard. And so you're not tied to only the CDP or the Unomi data, but you can kind of like mix and match, maybe with Google Analytics, maybe with other stuff. And we see that our customers are playing with this, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But at least it's like a really fun sandbox to play with all that data. So that's kind of nice. And you can see here as well, we did a mapping between the fields of the Elasticsearch and or the Unomi Elasticsearch and mappings of data types in Google Data Studio. And here it also gets trickier. And just to get some technical ramblings, because I was told not to do a product pitch, so that's why I'm doing technical ramblings. Is that if we try to have custom fields in profiles, we have kind of like a custom tracker that says, okay, add this, add that, and we don't have an interface to say, this is a new field, for example, your first name, and the first name is a string. Now, Apache Unomi does allow custom data to be added, but it doesn't know what fields are all in there. At least like I haven't found the API to understand what are all the fields available and the data types connected to it. So this is why we actually had to go directly to Elasticsearch. But that kind of works. Now, what else did we do?
Nick, if I may just clarify, that's what we're trying to achieve with JSON schema. So
awesome.
So that's what's missing for you.
yeah. Well, I mean, we found a way around it, so I'm not disappointed. Like we don't stop, and we just try to make it work. And I'm really happy with Apache Unomi, what it has. That wasn't the blame thing.
Oh no! I'm just saying it should help. I'm just trying to help people understand how things fit together. Sorry to cut you.
No, it's okay. Now, how could this help you, and how could you actually benefit from what Dropsolid did to build a product like this? Is that we built some public connectors and some public open source packages in our product that we say, okay, this is to give back to the community. As I explained, we're no Java experts. We don't have a single Java developer in the company, so we have to contribute in a different way. So we have a Node or a JavaScript connector because our front end is written in Angular. So the JavaScript actually connects with the API of Unomi through a library like this. Now, what else do we have? We have the same connector, but then for PHP, which is used in the Drupal module. And I'll explain you that in a bit as well. But if you have any PHP project that wants to use Unomi, it doesn't have to be Drupal. You could use this library to connect easily with the rules or with the segments and a couple of other APIs. It's not feature complete yet, but for what we try to do, it's more than enough, but we do welcome any kinds of merge requests or pull requests. So that all comes together in a Drupal module. Drupal is a really highly popular CMS. And maybe just to give you some insights in how that works. So this is just a Drupal site, the demo site that you saw before. And you can see that we can drag and drop this button top to bottom or even to the left. Fine, maybe the page builder wants to have it this way. But you can see that the two buttons or the two call for actions are here. Yeah, let me drag that here back here. Now, how can we personalize this? We edit this button, and here in the option list, you can see as well all the segments that come directly from Unomi as well. So you can say this button, show it only to the segment of Mother's Day, and then in the interface in the UI, we indeed also have that same segment because we defined it there. And this is how it actually makes the match between what should I show to people that fall into a specific segment. So the content editors that use Drupal can stay within Drupal. They don't have to go outside. They don't have to use an external system. They don't have to have some JavaScript pop-up also coming in and make it like a really complicated interface. So they're quite happy with how this works. Now, if you look at how it's configured, this is a Drupal configuration. You can see that there's 2 connectors possible. And this comes from the same contribution mindset that we have. We didn't make a connector in Drupal for the Dropsolid platform alone. We made a connector that has a plugin for the Dropsolid platform, but also has a plugin for self-hosted Unomis. So if you somehow host Unomi yourself, which is possible, you have your Drupal site yourself, you can actually start personalization without any form of support of Dropsolid. You will still not have an interface, but I do know that there are some projects out there on GitHub that have interfaces for Unomi on the local stack. So this is, by all means, please test this. You don't need Dropsolid to use Apache Unomi with Drupal, okay? So that's a bit how that looks like. It's not that complicated. What's the API endpoint of Unomi basically that you need to set? And then for the Dropsolid integration, it's with O authentication. If you switch this to basic authentication, which is the basic form of Apache Unomi to have authentication to the APIs, basically it switches to basic authentication. So maybe for the people that like architecture diagrams, because that's also a little bit of what I wanted to share here. It might not follow any standards of whatever these architecture diagrams today are made of, but basically what happens is that you have a capture script or a custom tracker on your website, the JavaScript tracker. It goes into a Google Cloud function, and then actually goes 2 ways. It goes directly to Apache Unomi to ask, okay, this profile has a new event, and it waits for the response to ask, okay, is this person in a certain segment? And it directly returns. And then asynchronously, it goes into a pops up, which is kind of like a queuing system in Google Cloud. And that actually goes into a pipeline where the algorithm tries to understand the entire profile and matches it against the model that we created with the groups. If that happens, and if somehow you actually match with a certain group of the model that was generated, it adds information back into your profile, as then you can see that here. It adds it to your profile in Unomi, and the next time that you visit a page, it will also know that you're part of that segment, if a segment was configured to be someone in that group. If it's too complicated, I'm happy to also do a Q&A in a bit, but this is from a high level point of view, what's happening in the Dropsolid product. So you can see this is where Unomi is used. I think that's most of what I wanted to say. We do have also documentation about the custom tracker that we use. And this might be a good conversation as well to have with the Unomi community, is how can we improve the existing basic tracker to be a bit more feature complete, because the tracker itself doesn't really do much. It doesn't have any JavaScript API as well to interact with events, as in inbound, outbound, or modifications. So if you'd like to understand how we build our tracker, you can go to support.dropsolid.com and then find out like how we make new custom events or make new custom fields in Unomi using just JavaScript stuff. Because ultimately the client, which is kind of like a technical marketeer, they're really comfortable in this JavaScript world because they can configure this in Google Tag Manager. They don't have to know Java code. They don't have to know PHP. They're in that comfort zone. And then lastly, what I wanted to share is a bit of a sneak peek of what we're adding soon in our product. And that's a collaboration with N8N, which is the full name is Nodemation, I think. The 8 comes from the Odemation, but it's kind of weird. And it's an open source Zapier-like solution. So what Serge explained in a bit about that marketplace, that could solve some part of that need. But what we're actually having on our roadmap is to build a connector for Apache Unomi and this NA10 so that you can configure Apache Unomi in this solution, also fully open source, sorry. And then from any event that goes inbound from Apache Unomi into this solution, see it like a Zapier kind of solution, you can go to Slack or you can go to Salesforce or anywhere else, but also the other way around. You can do profile updates based on inbound traffic from other sources into Unomi. So this is what we're working on. And as soon as it's ready, we're also happy to share that with the world. So that's a bit what Dropsolid is doing today.
Thanks a lot, Nick. That was fantastic. So are there any questions for Nick? Because he won't be able to stay until the end. So if you have any questions, now would be a perfect time.
Yeah, I have to pick up my 2-year-olds at the daycare in 45 minutes or something. So I do have a bit more time.
Oh, okay. I thought you needed to leave in 10, 15 minutes. So I was...
Yeah, 15 minutes perhaps. I still have. So, and otherwise, you people can find me as well on LinkedIn or on Twitter or any of the usual channels. If you Google my name, I'm sure you'll find me somewhere.
Oh, to dropsolid.com also.
As well, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't see any questions in the chat. You can also raise your hands if you see the raise hand button, if you want to ask a question vocally, that's also possible. All right. Well, if you have any more questions and you're still here, Nick, we'll take them afterwards. I don't know if you want.
Yeah, and otherwise send them to me and I'll answer them perhaps in the Slack channel of Unomi.
Yes, that's another. I actually did have a question for you, Nick, if I may. On the models and stuff, are those also open source or
the AI models?
Yeah.
No, those are closed source for now.
Okay.
You do have to have some form of protection of the intellectual property. I think we open up already a lot. Mm-hmm. But for now, that is close. I did have a diagram how that more or less works, but that I thought that might bring us a bit too far from the topic of today. But yeah, if someone is interested, maybe in a following meetup, I'm happy to explain that. It doesn't have to do much with Unomi itself. So the only thing that it does is once it has the results, it adds it to your profile. So there's no plugin that was written for Unomi itself.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So next up is Jean-Baptiste, JB.
Yeah. Can you give me the hand to oh, I can share my screen. All right.
I think you should be able to, yes.
Yeah, I can. Definitely. Hold on. I'm going to share my screen.
Do you want an intro or should I intro you?
No, I will do it myself. Okay. No worries. Hold on. As soon as I found my, here we are, share. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's up.
All right. So quickly, I don't want to bother you too much with all the technical details. I would like to just give you some updates about Apache Karaf and what we are preparing and how we could be helpful for Unomi. Because right now, Karaf is, I would say, the runtime used by Unomi. So just quickly, as you mentioned, Serge, I can do it myself. So I'm JB. I'm working on Huawei as an open source operation expert for Europe. I'm also technical advisor for UPIC. And I'm, as Serge, I'm a member of the Apache Software Foundation. And I was lucky enough to meet Serge during an ApacheCon in Houston. It was I would say few years ago, where we started to discuss about Unomi and what we can do at Apache. So today I'm still a PMC member for Unomi. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to contribute so much in the recent time, but I hopefully be able to to contribute again, and maybe Karaf 5 would be a good, I mean, Unomi could be a good first MVP for Karaf 5, just to testing the new feature we have in mind and see how it can be helpful for Unomi. So today, when we talk about Karaf, there are different, I would say, sub-projects. Some are not, today Unomi is mostly used the Karaf runtime, but I know that some Unomi users are using all the Karaf features. And for instance, there are some users that use Decanter to collect some data and metrics generated by Unomi and Karaf itself to provide some kind of dashboard and alerting system for Unomi. So all the Seller obviously is used by, I don't think it's used by Unomi, it's mostly used by Jahia, right, Serge? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we do use it to, but it's just to know which nodes are in the system. So it's very light usage, but yes, it is part of the default package.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, basically, you can see Karaf is a kind of umbrella project that contains different sub-projects. The key one, probably the key one is the runtime, and it's what we're gonna talk today. But keep in mind that Decanter and Sellers are also some pieces used by Unomi. So the purpose of a runtime, and I think that's why Serge and others were pretty interested by Karaf at the beginning to implement Unomi, is because it's a runtime and it's a kind of container. So it means that you can deploy anything into your Karaf runtime, and then this Karaf runtime can be executed anywhere. That's the base of Karaf. So in the past, we talk about application server. Is not, I mean, it's not the buzz anymore, but that's basically, I mean, it's something where you have some predefined and key and turnkey feature you can use, and you can drop your application in there. Today, we have a bunch of different use cases where Karaf is used. From the microservices up to IoT, to serverless, to embedded devices. I mean, it's pretty large. And I think the Karaf runtime is pretty flexible, where you decide exactly the features you want to use and leverage or not. And basically, we can consider that Unomi today is a kind of custom Karaf distribution containing Unomi application on there. So that's basically the purpose of Karaf. So today, in terms of releases and main branches, so the most active branch today is 4.3x. Unomi is not using it yet. Correct me as such, but that's my that's a long discussion we had together already.
Talk to CXF.
yeah, but honestly, CXF is a I mean, one of the main challenge we have today in Karaf is to guarantee the quality of the distribution. And by quality, I mean that be sure that all third parties we embed in Karaf are working fine all together. And it's pretty challenging because I have a concrete example that I since beginning of this week. It's just a simple GT upgrades can break everything. I mean, upgrading to JT 9444 basically breaks CXF, Camel, and so it breaks basically Unomi and everything. So it's pretty challenging for us to keep the right balance between upgrading to the latest version of the third parties and having the guarantee that it works fine altogether. So back on what we discussed. So today we maintaining 4.2x, 4.3x, and 4.4x is coming. 4.4x is basically not a major upgrade, but a slightly change in the Karaf upstream. And on a complete separate repository for now, we are working on Karaf 5, which is a complete rewriting about what is Karaf today. So what is Karaf 4 today? so the one used by Unomi. So it's an OAGI powered runtime. It means, Serge mentioned during his session, it means that people who wants to deploy stuff in Karaf, most of the time they have to know how OAGI is working and how to create all the OAGI headers in the manifest and all this stuff. And that's one of the reasons why Unomi now is using Groovy to deploy plugins, because it was very painful to create these OAGI bundles. And we have a bunch of features embedded. So what we name features is standard, enterprise, and others. So you have a bunch of features that actually Unomi is already leveraging. For instance, the HTTP layer is provided directly by Karaf. And today we can see Karaf adoption is pretty, I mean, it's fair enough. We have obviously Unomi, but all the Apache projects are using Karaf. Brooklyn, Camel, ActiveMQ is supporting Karaf, CXF is supporting Karaf, and others. And we also have some kind of companies that are leveraging Karaf. So Netflix is using Karaf as a kind of orchestrator for all the encoding platform. Red Hat is using it, Talend, OpenDaylight, Sonotype, and so on. The purpose of Karaf 5 is, okay, what's the state currently about Karaf? Why do we need, so what is pretty interesting in OAGI? And what is so painful about OAGI? And how we can cover more different use cases in a more, I would say, in a simpler way, and how to be very flexible. So some people like Serge or myself, we are a pretty big fan of OAGI. We know all the value of a model. We know all the prime model is clean and very interesting. But we know also that in terms of tooling or let's say OAGI manifest or class loader, it could be very painful. And some people prefer to use, for instance, stuff like Spring Boot, because with a couple of annotation, they can start. It's pretty crappy, but it works. That's my gut feeling. But I think that now in Karaf 5, we have to address this concern. I mean, what we can do better. And so the thing is, OAGI is pretty good in terms of the service layer, but pretty painful in terms of the bundle and package layer. So what we plan to do for Karaf 5 is basically to take something like a service-oriented runtime. It means that you will be able to deploy services into your Karaf runtime, but these services are not necessarily OAGI services. It could be pure Karaf services with all the dynamic approach, etc. And for that, we're leveraging some kind of, let's say, service provider interface provided by Java, but in a more dynamic way. And the purpose is to have some kind of native kind of application. So meaning that if you want still to be able to deploy your AGI application into Karaf 5, you will be able to do that. If you want to deploy a Spring Boot application in Karaf 5, you will be able to do that. If you want to create your application as a pure Karaf 5 application, that's fine. It's going to work as well. So the purpose is really to have some kind of more flexible with an application manager where you can deploy stuff on it. And when you do that, it means that you can share your service registry across multiple applications and not necessarily OAGI applications. So it means that, imagine we can deploy Unomi 1.5 in Karaf 5 in the OAGI application manager. All Unomi services will be visible from the Karaf 5 service registry, meaning that another application, maybe using Spring Boot, can be deployed in Karaf 5 and see all the services provided by Unomi, even if these applications are not using OAGI at all. So that's the challenge and the target of Karaf 5. So how it works is pretty simple. You have the main piece is, and central piece is the service registry. So the service registry is where you can load all your services. You can use a service loader, or you can load by yourself, but using code. Some services can register into a core services provided by Karaf is the lifecycle service. So basically, the lifecycle service allows the service to hook into a lifecycle like a start and stop, as you can do in AGI. And you also have the access to another core service, which is the config service. The config service provides you all the configuration used to run your Karaf 5 runtime. So all this stuff, how it works, is more like the Karaf 5 services is a more classic Java SPI code. So you still use an interface. It means that you can deploy your service using any kind of Java applications. So it could be pure Java, it could be OAGI, it could be Spring Boot, it could be CDI. It doesn't really matter. And optionally, a service can have a name, and the car can have a priority depending if you have some order in your service definition, like the Jahia, the Unomi Elasticsearch service should be started before the Unomi rule engine service, for instance. So you can order your services like this. So this is an example. This is the interface describing a service. So you can see that the priority and the name are optional. And eventually you can also implement on-register method that allows you to access directly to the Karaf 5 service registry. So for the one who knows OAGI, when you do that, you do a service registration and you have a start and stop with a bundle context. It's pretty close, but it's actually, I think, simpler because you have directly on register, which is a hook. Then the service registry, when you deploy a service, is basically a map. Okay, you have a map with a class and a service. So all the Karaf 5 services are automatically loaded into this registry, and by default, you have some core services provided by the registry. I'm talking about the lifecycle and the config, and eventually the class loader. But I don't provide a lot of details for now on the class loader service because it's still in the design discussion. So this is basically the service registry. So it's something that you can use directly in your code. So you can get any service, you can find a service by type, you can add your own service, remove a service. So this is all about the dynamic approach of the Karaf 5 services. So the configuration service is a core services that allows you to provide to access to all the configuration provided by the runtime. The main difference, if I compare Karaf 4 and Karaf 5, is today when you use Karaf 4, it means that you have basically the bin folder when you start your Karaf, and then you do Unomi start into Karaf to start all the layers extra. But basically, it's a kind of static distribution where you have all the scripts and folders extra. With Karaf 5, you can just use java-jar and it's done, and you can provide a JSON file describing the runtimes you want to. I'm going to show you an example of a Karaf JSON later. So it means that all the configuration you can provide through the Karaf JSON, you can access via this Karaf config services. So it means that Unomi, for instance, can access directly any system properties or environment variables or anything passed through the Karaf JSON file. The lifecycle is just a special services, which is, so it means that when you deploy your Karaf 5 service, you can define that you would like to be hooked in the start or stop lifecycle. So it means that you can provide your own start and stop method that the lifecycle service will call for you. So it acts as a callback system. So basically, it means that you can hook into and start any code that you want. Additionally to the core services, you have some external additional services provided by Karaf 5. So like the class path protocol handler that allows you to use any jar file located into your Karaf 5 class path. You have the extractor that allows you to take a jar file or a zip file and extract to the file system. You have a JSON config loader, the properties config loader, depending on the kind of configuration file you want to support. The welcome banner, just to display a fancy prompt when you start Karaf. And then you have two key services. They are the OAGI Application Manager service and the Spring Boot Application Managers services. So basically, if you want to deploy an existing application, this existing application is using Spring Boot, then before being able to deploy the Spring Boot application, you have first to register the Spring Boot Application Manager. And the same for the OAGI application. So if you want to take Unomi 1.5 today, and you want to deploy in Karaf 5, that's possible, and you just have to first start the OAGI Application Manager. And then these OAGI application managers will deploy the Unomi bundles, basically. So that's the end features. So to do that is pretty simple. What you can do is just define all the services you want. So this is an example using a POM XML, so a Maven POM, where you define, okay, this is the boot. The org Apache Karaf boot is the core layer of Karaf 5. That's the minimal artifact you need to start Karaf 5. And then you can see there, I define multiple additional services through the artifacts. So the JSON config loader, the class path protocol handler, the OAGI application manager, and the welcome banner are additional artifacts that provide Karaf 5 services deployed into Karaf. Then to execute Karaf, you have two approach. The first approach is to use the default. So basically in Karaf boot, you have a main method already defined. And so you can do just java.jar myjar, and it's done. Or you can programmatically, you can start your, you can start Karaf 5 via code. So you can see there, the only thing that I'm doing, I'm creating a Karaf with a Karaf builder, and that's it. I don't have to do anything else. I just define this builder. Now, if you want to create a native Karaf 5 application, the only thing you have to do is, for instance, this is my simple service, which implements services. So the service is provided by Karaf 5. And you can see I give a name, and I can hook on the onRegister method. Then the only thing that I have to do is in the meta-inf/services folder of my jar file, I'm just adding org Apache Karaf boots p service, where I provide my implementation of a service. And that's it. As soon as I will add this jar file into my Karaf 5 class loader, this service will be automatically deployed. Eventually, additionally to just deploying my service, I can hook on start and on shutdown. So this is how you can do that. You remember when I have the onRegister method, I can have access to the service registry, the Karaf 5 service registry. So it means that using the service registry, I can retrieve one of the core services provided by Karaf 5, including the Karaf lifecycle service. So it's what I'm doing there. So you can see that I'm using service registry.get Karaf lifecycle service. And once I have my Karaf lifecycle service, I can define, okay, this is a new method that I would like to add on start or on shutdown. And here you can put the code in of your service. So this code will be executed by the Karaf lifecycle service when it starts or when it shuts down. And finally, another thing that you can do is to specify some special kind of application through the Karaf JSON or Karaf property config. So this is what I'm doing there. You can see that I have some, in my Karaf JSON, I have some properties, and then the properties are used by some services deployed in Karaf. So we can imagine to have unomi.elasticsearch.location, or we can directly use Unomi Elasticsearch system property or environment variables, whatever. It's already supported. And so then in the applications array of the JSON, you can define a list of URL and types. So you can see there, I can define the location of Unomi bundle, like my bundle.jar, and I just specify this jar file is an OAGI bundle. And then automatically Karaf 5 will say, okay, this is an OAGI bundle. So I delegate the management of this kind of application to the OAGI application manager. The same for Spring Boot. So you can see there, I directly provide the location of my Spring Boot app, and then you deploy and you specify this is Spring Boot type of application. And you can imagine that we can add new application service manager like CDI or I don't know, maybe Groovy apps or whatever. So we can imagine to have a Groovy application manager where you directly put the Groovy location, and then it will be automatically deployed into Karaf 5. And then to run your Karaf 5, you can repackage as an executable jar. No need to have a tarball that you or zip file that you extract and then you start. It could be all packaged as a jar file. Why it's pretty interesting to do this approach is because it's Docker convenient and it's Kubernetes friendly. You just do Java jar, and so you can create a Docker image pretty easily. And then you can use config map from Kubernetes and all this stuff out of the box. No need to add anything else or plugin or whatever. This is an example of a Karaf 5 distribution that time. So instead of creating an executable jar file, you can still, as we do for Karaf 4 today, we can still use a tarball or zip archives where basically you have all embedded with a bin folder, the etc folder, as you used to do up to Karaf 4. So this is an example. You can see I'm just using java.jar Karaf4 like .jar file. And so you can see there it's starting and it's deploying some OAGI applications. So you can see there, for instance, I have my OAGI application that coming from Karaf 4, but it runs into Karaf 5. So it means that Karaf 5 can deploy all the feature service extra that you already know from Karaf 4. It can be run and deployed in Karaf 5 directly. So what's my next step about Karaf 5? It's still under discussion development. I'm working on my GitHub with a couple of guys. Francois is heavily involved. We are moving forward on this one. What we plan to do is we have new services we want to test and push before donating this repo as a new branch on Apache Karaf repo. So the next step is basically having something running and ready to show and test on my GitHub, and then start a discussion on the main list, on the Karaf main list, to see if people agreed or not about what we started. And then if they agreed, then we're gonna donate this repo as a branch on the Karaf GitHub Gitbox repo. So that's probably before the end of this year. And the purpose is eventually to have a RC1, a release candidate, before the end of this year. Why it could be interesting for Unomi? For two reasons. First is exactly what Serge discussed during his session, is the adoption and easy creating Unomi plugin. I mean, Groovy is one, but imagine if people can create Unomi plugin using Spring Boot or using CDI or using, I don't know, anything, and all deploy into a single runtime, which is Karaf, without any additional feature required by Unomi. Could be pretty interesting. So that's exactly the purpose and why I'm thinking that Karaf 5 could be pretty interesting for Unomi in terms of adoption, and maybe refactoring some part of Unomi to use directly. I mean, instead of using OAGI everywhere, maybe having the core of Unomi using OAGI and some or additional plugins using Spring Boot or other framework could be interesting. That's it. If you have any question about Karaf and next step, that's on the main list and so on. .
Thank you, JB.
Welcome. Yeah.
Before we go to questions, I do have 2 questions about your talk. So first of all, do you plan to be compatible with GraalVM and stuff like that for native apps?
So yeah, that's exactly one another thing that is pretty interesting. Using an approach like OSGI is pretty challenging to run with GraalVM and all these native. So focusing on OSGI, I think it's a no-go. The effort will be too huge. But talking about Karaf 5 itself, without the OSGI application manager, of course, yeah, it can work on GraalVM out of the box. So that's another purpose of having Karaf 5. Yeah.
But for those of you who are not familiar with GraalVM, it's really basically a technology that allows you to generate native code for a system based on Java. So it's pre-compiling things, and of course with dynamic systems like OSGI, it's quite tricky. But what Jean-Baptiste has presented here is really more in line with what you could do with GraalVM. And my second question is more of a joke, but can we have a JavaScript version of Karaf 5?
Oh, if you remove script and just Java, yes. No, honestly, the OSGI application, the application manager in Karaf 5 is simply any kind of code that can run anything. So, we can imagine to have something like leveraging Rhino or not Karaf 5 itself, but being able to deploy JavaScript apps into Karaf 5 through a JavaScript application manager. Technically, that could be doable.
Yeah, it was more a joke in terms of the fact that a lot of the problems you're trying to address here exist in the JavaScript world in the browser. And it could be interesting to have something similar.
I remember we already discussed about that, but we are not on the same space. We are more, Karaf is more on the back end.
Yes,
but
right.
yeah, I know that in my former company, people spend a lot of time to discuss with me about OSGI and trying to apply with all the front-end technologies. They failed, to be honest, but yeah, you're right. Most of the concerns and issues we see today in Java could be applied on a lot of front-end technologies, for sure.
As soon as you need something modular, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, JB. I don't know if I want to go back to the slides I had. Let me just see. So yeah, before we go to general questions, I just had a very I think a couple of slides. So we've heard a lot about what people have done with Unomi, but also Unomi does, the project itself can use help. And it doesn't have to be code. One of the things that's very valuable, and one of the things that we hope we can get out of this meetup and maybe other ones, is really the call for testimonials. People using Unomi, and even if they're just at the evaluation phase, but just telling us, this is what we're looking at, and this is why we are interested in Unomi. The Slack channel has over 150 members right now, which is quite amazing. And I would love to know more about what people are doing with Unomi, and what they like and what they don't like. That's also fine. But if we could have more testimonials that we could share on the website, for example, that would be fantastic, because we could really show the community that's behind Unomi. The other thing, of course, is directly related to that. If you're involved in Unomi and you like the solution, it can really help if you promote the project within your network. On documentation, I take the blame partly here. We know there are things that can be done better. For example, a lot of the documentation is oriented towards a lot of the backend APIs. There's less in terms of the personalization, for example, stuff like that. So if you learn something and you feel okay contributing, a little bit, that's would be fantastic. Also, of course, if you had deployments, performance, reliability, things that you had experience with, that's always great to help out with. And there are also currently open issues on the project, nothing too big, but that could also be a good starting point. Of course, we're always interested in having new features suggested. And of course, if you feel more like you can do more than that, but actually implement something, that's fantastic. Just a recommendation, don't start implementing something that you want to contribute before talking about it, because, then there might be a bad fit or something. So, it's very easy to get in touch with us through Slack, through mailing lists, or even directly. I'm fine with that. Don't hesitate to reach out. Few ideas of, contributions or things that could be contributed. We showed the Kibana dashboards, which are built into the Jahia product, but those are not specific at all. You can run Kibana directly on top of the Elasticsearch that is used in Unomi. So, Kibana dashboards is basically you use their UI, the UI of Kibana to build these dashboards. And so you could build your own dashboards, and we can even share those in the Unomi project. The web tracker we mentioned with Nick. We know the web tracker can be improved. That's something that's definitely something that's, not even back end, it's front end. So there's different things that could be done there. Kafka integration also, there's a little bit of it, but there's more that could be done. And of course, any ideas that you guys might have. All right, so we've sort of reached the slideware part, at the end of the slideware part of this presentation. So I'm going to try to do something a little bit risky here. Let me just check. Yeah. So on the topics that we could talk about, I mean, it's really the floor will be open. I would just love to know if you guys like this meetup, first of all, if you would like to have more. Well, I'll put where's the beer. Unfortunately, we're online, so we won't be able to do that. But if you have beer wherever you are, or whatever else is your favorite drink, feel free to have one after. Thanks so much for listening. And yeah, so what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to give everyone permission to talk. So I hope this will work. And because I'm not very familiar, and so you may just unmute yourself if you have questions, and hopefully not everybody will start talking at the same time or will not be too shy. So I'm still going through the list here. Oops. Allow to talk. There we go. And I think I've got everyone. Yeah, so we're about 17 now. I think I've got everybody here. So as you can see, we have quite a nice group of people. Thank you so much, all of you, to participate here. And if you have any questions, you can also ask them in the chat. That's fine. And yeah, I think that's it. So I'll wait a couple, maybe a minute or so. Oh, David, yeah, sure. You can just unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Serge. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to sort of discuss at a high level ideas around the fact that event collection is very sort of like web cookie based.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of other CDPs don't seem to have that coupling. So essentially, like if I just wanted to import a bunch of events from an external system and then get them collected into Unomi and kind of have Unomi as the centralized CDP? What's the best approach that either you guys are taking or that is built into the platform for that?
So that's a very interesting question, because unfortunately, I don't think we have anybody from Yotpo here, but correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, they actually had that use case where they have a huge collection of events that was generated some other way, and they wanted to import those into Unomi. And they even did things like they wanted to be able to modify events after the fact, which was very strange from the initial design that Unomi was based on.
Yeah, I think that's a whole other debate, right? For sure.
Yeah. But I mean, basically, what they just use is they just use the event collection endpoints to input all that data, and the endpoint was capable of doing that, and then just importing all that data in. And they even, as I said, they even did sort of like data quality kind of things on top of that, and to be able to improve the events over time. So even though these events, a lot of people can consider them as immutable, they actually had mutable events, and Unomi, they actually contributed to the platform to enable all of this. There's also ways you can import events through the Kafka integration that JB actually contributed. And you could also go directly to Elasticsearch and insert events in there, and Unomi would pick them up. So there's a lot of different ways you could do that.
How about more specifically around the session management? And I think that's what I'm kind of getting at. Is there inherently the as part of the model from something like the web-based collection being that there is inherently a session? So what about events that don't necessarily tie to a specific session? They're just some external events.
So here again, it's a very good question, because I talked about sessions initially as part of the model. They're not a hard requirement. You can provide events with no sessions, and that will still work.
Okay.
There was actually a bug that we fixed in 1.5, I think, but now it's possible. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, David. That was a great question. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I have one question for the floor. Did you like this meetup? And
Yes!
and if so, we missed ApacheCon this year, unfortunately, but we'll try to be present at the next one. But I also think it's very interesting to have these community-specific events. So, I would love to hear if you want another one of these, I don't know, in 6 months' time or something like that. And if you have any things you would like to share, for example, if you would like to present what you've done with Unomi, that would be absolutely fantastic. And in the meantime, if you have any questions and stuff, or any suggestions for something you would like to see in a meetup, that's also input we would love to have.
There is an open question in the chat, Serge, if you want to take that one.
Which question? Where is it? The question?
It's in the Q&A.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was not monitoring that one. I'm sorry. How does the platform bridge the anonymous browsing to the logged-in personalizations? How does entity resolution work under the hood? Does it rely on hard key matches? Okay, yeah, absolutely. So that's a very good point. So basically, by default, Unomi manages anonymous profiles. I mean, because when somebody comes into the system, we don't necessarily know who they are. So there's only a unique identifier that is generated. And then, for example, one of the ways to sort of integrate with identity resolution is, for example, if you have somebody logging into a system, you would then use that logging as an event that you send to Unomi, and then you can actually, along with the event, you can say, this person has logged in as such and such person, identified person, and you can send that to Unomi, which can then store the identity. And what it can also do, for example, let's say the identifier is an email. You can also configure Unomi to actually look for that email in past profiles, and then if it's identified as a strong hard key match, as you mentioned, it will perform the merge of the information in the various profiles and retain a single profile in the end. These require hard key matches. It is not recommended to do automated merging with, let's say, probabilistic resolution of profiles. But you could very well, if you needed to do like probabilistic kind of matching, you could do that with custom actions that you use in Unomi. We don't have something built in right now, but it's something that could definitely be added as an extension.
So if the ID comes from an external connector or an external solution, we could use that as we are using the email or any login, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And as I mentioned in Unomi 2, we will have the possibility to use multiple external IDs. So for example, if you have an ID coming from a CRM, an ID coming from a support system, an ID coming from the web, you will then be able to attach all those different IDs to a single profile, which will simplify the management of profiles and identity resolution. And it will also make the data set a little bit less big because you won't have to have all these different profiles that you're managing. Thank you for the question, Ken. And there's another one from Kevin. Oh, that was for JB. Okay. Okay. Anyone else? So feel free to mute or unmute yourself. Oh, yes, Risto.
Hi. I would like to ask you a question. Is there a possibility to raise an event that is postponed? So let's assume that there's one event that, for example, somebody puts something into the basket, and then after 15 minutes, I would like to check if I would like to raise another event and check if the person bought that product.
Yeah. So you mean like a scheduled action or something like that, right?
Yes, just action that rises postponed action.
Yeah, no, that's not built in yet, but it's definitely something that's very interesting to add, because one of the things that I didn't mention it, but it's true that something that we really want to improve is the background scheduling part of Unomi. Right now, it's basically using executor threads and stuff like that. So if you needed it today, you could build your own action that would implement this, but it would be much better if Unomi had some kind of service to do that. So that's definitely, thank you for bringing that up. It's definitely something that could be improved, yes.
Maybe it's a naive question, but would there be a way to leverage the profile past events with, like, instead of using days, we could use minutes or stuff like that? Or?
You could do that, but you will still need basically the functionality of knowing when you do that poll, basically. So you need to say, okay, after 10 seconds, there's basically, I mean, we have a schedule service inside of Unomi, but it's really basic right now. It's not doing more advanced things like that. But yes, and basically, Risto, I think you know where both of us are going with this. So the minute you have that, you basically have much more powerful automation systems. So right. That's basically Yeah, absolutely. And so it's definitely something that, yeah, I forgot to mention because that's something we've been looking at.
And I have another question.
Sure.
I've encountered some issues when I was collecting data, and I think this would probably be solved in the future with the JSON schema, because as everything is stored in Elastic, Elastic is no schema database, but it actually has some schema.
Yeah.
And when I stored some properties of the event, and for example, let's give it that one property was an integer, and then the same property was a string, then Elastic is not able to index this, and this is very hard to find out what happened. It actually just breaks and you don't see what happened.
Yes.
So is there a way to avoid this? I think that JSON schema probably would solve it, that give you information that there is something wrong with the schema. But is there a way to solve it right now?
Well, I mean, the thing you could do is, if you know exactly what your data structure is, you could provide Elasticsearch mappings to be deployed with your installation. But that, of course, makes it pretty static. It's not necessarily as dynamic as you want. But the biggest restriction with Elasticsearch is that once it's set a mapping to a specific type, you cannot change it. So that's something that can. I mean, there's some. Most of the cases are okay, but there are some edge cases where this can be a problem. But I mean, on the JSON schema part, we're quite aggressively developing this, and I'm really hoping we can release 2.0 very, very soon. I mean, as soon as possible, because the JSON schema solves not only that problem, but a lot of other problems in terms of data quality and data integrity. And also the fact that you can then, for example, the properties, we have a dynamic system of declaring properties. So you now have an API to declare new properties. You could then declare the properties with complex data structures, and those would then be enforced on Elastic and inside of Unomi, especially on the data collection side, meaning that if somebody tries to feed it something that does not match that data structure, it will fail. Does that answer your question? Or?
Yes, actually it fails right now, because when you send a set of properties with this first set of properties, Elastic will create a mapping, a dynamic mapping for that, and will assign a type for a certain key. And then when you insert another event that has different type, it will break. So actually it does it right now. So you don't have to declare a mapping, because it's dynamically declared.
Yes,
so,
but it's currently the way Elasticsearch does that is it does that by guessing sort of the the mapping, and that can be dangerous.
Yeah, and that's right. That's my question, because right now there's a lot of issues involving this. When you just collect data and at some day it just breaks, and you don't know why.
So
and people do not know what happened. You have to just examine logs and find what kind of events just came, and what kind of events we have, and what types we have. That's why I think that a JSON schema would solve this, because it will return an information on the collision of types.
Yes, and actually the way JSON schema is integrated, it will even give you like very specific information about what has failed. So I was kind of impressed with the library that was integrated, because it will actually tell you, for example, on this line you have this character that's not valid, or stuff like that. So it's quite good. Now I see that David is actually answering your question. He says, we've gone with Elasticsearch index template to address the mapping concern with Unomi events. All the trade-off with dynamic mappings in ES, with great power comes great responsibility. I love the quote, David. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's it's just one of those things, right? Where I think you're bringing up a little more of a Elasticsearch kind of design over Unomi, right? With this particular example, and anything that's dynamic, it can only be so smart on its own. And we've run into the same kind of things, and the implementation so far that allowed us to get through it is the trade-off was we want to sort of figure out the best balance between it being fully open and dynamic, and then as we're learning a little bit more about our events, we're coming up with this. So the solution was we implemented a template, and the nice thing about Elasticsearch's index templates there is they're priority based as well. So the way we're managing it in terms of customization to what you get out of the box from Unomi is actually given to us by Elasticsearch. So when we deploy Unomi, we just also deploy our template into Elasticsearch and just say, hey, when Unomi goes and creates a new index, because we're just using the default monthly index pattern, that we just explicitly say, hey, these are the ultimate fields we care about and we know about. And then if something new comes in tomorrow, we get the value of Elasticsearch's dynamic mapping, but we still will run into issues if it just happens to be something new we've discovered, and that's our trade-off, right? So it kind of 80-20, 80% of the time we're okay, and sometimes we just run into an issue and we have to quickly deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give you an example of how far I'm going with the JSON schema thing is that I actually realized that we could go all the way to doing differential JSON schemas, where we would say, this is the JSON schema of this version, and this is the JSON schema of the next version. And we could then even have kind of ETL tools that could manage that change. But I mean, of course, that's getting too far ahead of what I'm looking at, but it could definitely be interesting, in the future. For example, if you realize that you have a property that was string based, but you actually were feeding it dates and you would prefer to convert it to a date, having JSON schema as a basis for doing that then makes it possible to be independent of the backend. And then you can just, for example, we're working on a tool right now that makes it easy to do mapping changes in Elasticsearch, and along with the data being reindexed in the proper format. So things like that are things that JSON schema makes possible, which was really not that easy or quite hard to do with Elasticsearch. But as you said, David, it's also very interesting that we have those options. We can go to the Elasticsearch layer to address some of these problems.
And I just posted the link directly to Elasticsearch's documentation around dynamic templates.
Okay, thank you. I have more questions, but I don't want to take all the time.
I'm sorry?
I have more questions, but I don't want to take all the time. So,
well, let's take one more.
all right. I was just wondering, is Unomi collecting events in an asynchronous way? I mean, that can you collect events in parallel?
Well, I mean, you mean in a single Unomi instance, right?
Yeah. Oh, but maybe you can say we can have like many instances, but
yes.
So I sent like 10 events that have the same profile ID, and they actually manipulate the profile. And do they do it in parallel?
So basically, so I think I know what you're trying to ask. So, I mean, if you have that problem, it's best to batch events. So you can batch events for a single profile, and that way you can make sure that the profile modifications will happen in order. Now, if you're feeding it concurrently tons of events that will generate a profile modification, here basically it's a question of the last one wins basically. So you won't
Yes.
necessarily get all the updates. So.
Yes, that was my question, because that can corrupt profile. And there is another issue that I encountered, that Elastic does not refresh the data just after it's updated. So then this can create a lot of mess. So when
yeah,
I send,
that's something that I mean, Elasticsearch has a delay in terms of indexation. So between the time you send it the information and the time it actually indexes it, there's like a 1 second delay. They do that for performance. So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve here. But for example, if you're trying to, let's say, for example, I mean, this is a crazy example, but let's say you're tracking mouse movements on a web page, and you want to make sure that you're collecting all those mouse movements correctly for the profiles. Then that's why, I mean, in that case, I would definitely recommend batching events, because you can batch these events in a single HTTP request and send those all to Unomi in one go, and that will do what you expect it to do. Now, it's true that if you have a sequence of requests to Unomi that have dependencies to one another, that's where you can run into these problems that you're mentioning. We looked at solutions like caching layers and stuff like that, but there's nothing really that works in every scenario. I really recommend that, try to find a way from the front end part, or I mentioned the Kafka integration. That one will also process everything in order.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions. Okay, there's another one. Yes, David, to answer your question, yes, the Kafka injector, I think. That one I'm not that familiar with. Jean-Baptiste JB is the one who wrote it, but it should. So Dave had a question. Does Unomi query profiles by ID on update though? Yeah, no, no, it does use the transactional lookup. So it does limit that problem. So what Dave is asking is are we using queries to look up the profiles? In most cases, no. The only case where we do that is in case of a merge, where we're going to look for all the profiles that have the hard key, the same hard key, and merge those. But in most cases, it does not. But it doesn't. Sorry. Unomi and Elasticsearch are not ACID compliant, meaning that they don't have real transactional models. So if what you're trying to do requires ACID compliance, you're going to run into these kind of problems. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reacting to Dave's question. Okay, well, we've reached the allocated time. I suggest we bring this to a close. Please, oh, okay, David is asking if anybody has an example. Unfortunately, I don't have an example.
No problem, Serge. And I mean, you guys right off the bat said we need help with documentation, right?
Yeah.
So I can only ask so much of the community, right?
But basically, the Kafka injector takes serialized event object as input.
Right. Okay.
So,
yeah, perfect. Thanks.
So yes, the recording will be public. Absolutely, that's the whole base. So yeah, please give me some feedback on if you liked it and if you want more. It doesn't have to be now. It can be anywhere, any channel you choose. I personally had a great time. I'd like to thank our panelists. Some of them had to leave already. So yeah, and also let me know if the time frame worked for you, the length and the time zone. I mean, because we can also adjust that. Yeah. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon in the future. And yeah, thank you.